Greetings, everyone. My name is Federica, and I'm the CEO of Global Fashion Agenda. I'm truly excited to be moderating this session on equity versus equality. This session aims to educate our audience about the connection between sustainability and justice, highlighting how leading companies address this within their business strategies. We are thrilled to bring together at CFS Plus two extraordinary leaders to offer you their perspectives on how they approach opportunities related to the intersection on sustainability and justice throughout their business and day-to-day activities. I will facilitate the discussion to make sure we will not only focus explicitly on the fashion industry, rather, it will be a higher level conversation which can potentially provide real life examples from leading companies on how they work to address this intersectionality. Join me here today for this important conversation are two remarkable women with unique insight into the topics at hand. Welcome, Dr. Ayana, and welcome, Felicia.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you so much. Really happy to be here.
As Nike's Chief Talent, Diversity, and Culture Officer, Felicia Mayo will speak to the connection between equity and equality and the way that Nike lives its purpose throughout its business. Felicia Mayo is joined by Dr. Ayana Elizabeth Johnson, who helped educate numbers of the audience on the inherent connection between social and environmental justice and how this work is not a versus, but a connection. Before diving into the conversation, let me briefly tell you about their work. Dr. Ayana is a marine biologist, policy expert, writer, and Brooklyn native. She's founder of the nonprofit think tank Urban Ocean Lab, co-founder of the climate initiative, the All We Can Save project, and co-creator of the podcast, How to Save a Planet. Well, when All We Can Save book was published in September 2020, it became an instant bestseller. I was particularly struck by the impressive collection of essay, poetry, and art featuring more than 40 women in the climate movement, and by your goal with the anthology to open up space for a more generous and mainstream dialogue that involves every possible voice. Felicia Mayo joined Nike in 2019 from Tesla with a long career before that in HR, talent acquisition, and diversity management at various global companies such as Oracle and Juniper Network. In her current role as Chief Talent, Diversity, and Culture Officer, Felicia focuses on diversity and inclusion within talent development and culture, two key areas of acceleration in Nike's commitment to diversity, culture, and inclusion. So I cannot wait to get this conversation started. Felicia, let's start with you. Nike has been very vocal and outspoken about racial injustice over the years. Please tell us more about how you're creating systemic solutions that address inequality inside and outside the company.
Yes, so thank you for that question. And again, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to everyone here and to be on this panel with the lovely Dr. Ayana, as well as speaking with you, Frederica. So to your question, as we speak about today, the balance of equity and equality, you'll see a bit of passion that will come from me, and I'm sure you'll see the same level, if not more, from Dr. Ayana, as we talk about our areas of expertise. And like just answering your question, I believe that systemic change requires systemic solutions. Like, again, systemic change requires systemic solutions. Like, we must look at the systemic solutions in order to drive us. And that is really something that I have focused in on throughout my career, and especially in the area of diversity, equity, and inclusion. At Nike, as many of you are aware, we are a very purpose-driven company, and we believe in the power of sport to move the world forward. And power of sport is at the center of absolutely everything that we do, everything. And so when you layer on top of that diversity, equity, and inclusion and sustainability, it's nirvana for me. It is that place in which I get to innovate. And Nike and our purpose leaders, we get to innovate, and it becomes very magical for us, and magic that impacts the planet. So let's talk a bit about what does purpose mean here at Nike. And for us, it means that we have a focus on people, planet, and play. It's real simple, but not so simple. It's people, planet, and play. And as you just highlighted, Frederica, just my experience, it has been with people in human resources, and working in tech companies, working in digital, now working here at Nike in the consumer goods and apparel and footwear. It's amazing when all of my experience has now come into a culmination of being able to look at how do we drive the planet forward through sport. And so that means, with my career, investing in people has been my passion. People, that's where Nike, we're investing in the power of people to move the world forward. You talk about play. We're helping kids realize their potential through play and sport. How amazing. I get to do that with, I've always done that with my kids, even before as a child myself, and now to be able to really look at how does play come to life and for our kids, and how do we move that forward in sport. And then the third area, which is planet, which is our major focus for today. We're innovating here at Nike to protect the planet. Like, those are three lofty areas that we are focused in on, and we are so laser focused in on it. It's about everything that we do every day. It is those three pillars that we're always at the top or the front of our minds. But above all, we know that leading with purpose, it means striving for better. It's progression over perfection, is what I always say, and it's kind of my daily mantra. It's progression over perfection. Knowing that we're always moving forward, we're striving for better every day, every launch that we have, from a footwear perspective to an apparel perspective, right? It's from the impact that we are able to have through our consumer goods that we create in the world. And we know we do that most through building diverse, equitable, and inclusive teams, and having that company that really embraces DEI. So let me transition a bit and tell you a bit about some of those systemic solutions that we are doing internally that may give you a little bit more of insight. So here at Nike, our aspiration is that we become a proof point to the industry for diversity, equity, and inclusion globally as we accelerate innovation through all of our apparel and our footwear. Now, noting that is not a small deal. I take the weight of that every day and know that it is not where one person can solve it. If it were the case, it would be solved by now. It takes all of us. And so as we're looking at that as an organization, as a company, internally, we know we are building a creative and inclusive culture where all voices are welcome. Internally, I am always talking to employees. My team is always pulsing the employees to see how things are going, what is happening in the organization, to ensure that our employees know that their voices are very important because they help to actually add to those solutions. We can't create solutions without the voices that are internal. as we sit back and we look at, and as a great proof point, this past year, where after the racial reckoning, we heard directly from our employees, specifically our Black employees globally, and how we can continue to advance equity and inclusion in our company. We weren't starting from the beginning, so that was a great point for us, but we knew we had to progress forward. And so we continue to work directly with our employees to ensure that we created that inclusive environment that is so needed from a systemic perspective, dealing with some of the, gnarly concerns and issues that most companies may walk away from or may just highlight. We went really deep with our employees. And final proof point, how do we show up in not only internally, but also in the industry? Because it's very important. We know that actions that we actually take internally, they quickly go external because our employees are connected to our consumer base, and that's how we like it. It's very important for us. And so we know that all of the work that we do here, such as great proof point, Serena Design Crew. We have our Serena Williams design crew that works together. We brought together diverse designers because we knew diversity, we needed to increase in the designer industry. How we did that, we had most of our designers come and work for us. And we've sourced for designers in cities that we normally would not have sourced for designers. We made sure that through our athlete, Serena Williams, this was a desire that she wanted and that we wanted. How lovely is that to have a partnership and collaboration? So we were able to push forward and move forward with not only adding diverse designers to Nike, but also diverse designers in the industry, in the pipeline. And we are continuing that every year and working on diversity in design. And we just dropped our first line not long ago, which is awesome because I've seen it from beginning to now dropping lines for Serena Williams, one of our premier athletes. And we continue to work directly with sport and our athletes overall. Looking at the systemic solutions, I could talk all day about this, Frederica, but I know we don't have enough time. However, I just want to say that we know as a company such as Nike with our brand, we have a responsibility. We don't take that responsibility lightly at all. We recognize connecting to our consumer base is very important, and connecting to our workforce is very important. 1 and 2 may be the same, but not the same, because we have nuances that we have to make sure we're balancing to ensure that we are looking at systemic solutions at all times. My last point for you is through our Black community commitment and social and community impact work that we've done. That is, again, external, where we specifically focused in on partnering with organizations to help give voice to historically underserved communities around the world. Ultimately, we can't power sport without addressing the 3 pillars of purpose: people, planet, and play. And we have to address all the issues that intersect with our employees and our consumer base, as I highlighted. We know that making progress overall starts with changing hearts and minds. And I know that is a huge, huge thing to just sit and think about. How do you change hearts and minds? Well, you show your experiences, you share your experiences, and you have those discussions and you listen to the voices that are there. And you actually partner together to see how we can all work together in this space of purpose, of diversity, and ultimately, of course, sustainability, as we'll be talking about today. And so that is part of what we're doing as purpose leaders here at Nike. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And Dr. Ayana, Felisa raised so many great points about how Nike is addressing 3 purpose pillars, particularly by addressing inequalities. As a climate expert, can you tell us more about Urban Ocean Lab and other ways you rally communities around equitable solution in the climate sector?
Sure. And I think to sort of build on what Felicia was saying, it's so interesting to hear her remark on the critical importance of listening to employees as they were responding to this second wave of Black Lives Matter activism and engagement, to really understand, you know, what's the breadth of perspectives, because it's the same thing that we need when we think about sustainability, right? We need people in every department. We need people at all levels of every corporation, every nonprofit, every government to be thinking through creatively solutions, collaboration. How do we adapt to the climate crisis in a way that actually make sure that everyone is okay in the future? Because if we don't have diversity in the context of climate decision making, then we will end up having a lot of people left behind, having communities that are not cared for in what we term a just transition. So how does social justice and addressing the climate crisis go together? And that is like, well, who's making the decision? So there's a lot of parallels there. And certainly within Nike, there's a huge opportunity for employees to be innovative within the company, within product, within marketing, within how we tell the story. Because, you know, one of the things that Felicia is overseeing is culture. And so when we think about fashion, when we think about climate, when we think about sustainability, when we think about justice, all of these are like very foundationally cultural issues. And so that's why I was excited to join you here today, because I think it's important to go to these epicenters of culture creation, fashion, and sustainable fashion, thankfully becoming a bigger and bigger part of that conversation. And so when I think about, in my experience, ways that all of these threads have come together, there's two examples that come to mind. So one, you mentioned very graciously in introducing me, the climate anthology, All We Can Save, that I co-edited, that came out last year. And the reason that that is an anthology and not a book that I wrote myself, but one that I co-edited, is because there are so many important voices we need to listen to. There are so many different perspectives to include when we think about how do we transform basically everything, right? If we have to change our electricity and our transportation and our manufacturing and our agriculture and our land use and our buildings, that's going to take people in every sector. It's going to take a cultural shift. It's going to take a political transformation, economic adaptation in major ways. And so a lot of my work is focused on making sure that we are listening to the diversity of voices that we need in order to come up with solutions that are actually going to work, right? It's not that diversity is a nice to have, it's that it's absolutely critical. And so that's why my first book that I co-edited with Catherine Wilkinson was an anthology. And it's been, I think, in part well received because people can see themselves in that work, right? Whether you are, you know, not everyone is a scientist, and not everyone wants to be like an activist and marching. People want to like bring their skills to this work. So whether you're a lawyer or a teacher or a journalist or a designer, there is a role for you to play. And we have all of that represented in that collection, including fashion. There is a model who writes an essay that is a letter to fossil fuel executives, saying, it's Cameron Russell writing about the parallel that she sees between the fashion industry and the fossil fuel industry being extractive and exploitative historically, and like what transformation would actually look like. So it's really, really exciting to get to be a part of that. And then the other nonprofit that I co-founded is Urban Ocean Lab, as you mentioned. And we have this coalition that we're co-leading and building around ocean justice. So where does ocean conservation mash up against the imperative for achieving social justice? Because we rarely think about those two things together, especially in federal ocean climate policy in the US. And so our approach there is to build a coalition to say, let's gather some of the largest ocean conservation groups who have expressed a desire to do their work in a way that is grounded in social justice, but they're maybe not quite sure what exactly that means. It's like good intentions, but like not a lot of detail, and they don't want to get it wrong. I think a lot of us feel that way, right? Whether it comes to sustainability or justice issues, we like, it's kind of can be really scary to go out on a limb and maybe get called out. So we're bringing these large NGOs together and then a bunch of the smaller justice-focused ocean conservation groups to really lead the conversation and say like, well, this is what we're seeing. This is what we're seeing in coastal communities. These are the actual needs and priorities. How can we all then come together around a shared policy agenda at the national level and push that together in a unified way? And so that's the work that is starting right now, which has been really exciting to help lead.
Brilliant. Thank you. And Felicia, sometimes these topics can be complex and it's difficult for people to relate or see themselves in these issues. Can you share more about how these issues show up in your life, both professionally and personally?
Thank you for that question. And I think it shows up for all of us, in some way, right? And so for me personally, these issues show up probably since I've been born. I grew up on the East Coast and have seen, just the varied weather patterns. Overall, I grew up in it wasn't a predominant neighborhood where it was more diverse and we had pollution. So I grew up with some of the impacts there. I think about my kids. They're both athletes, and my daughter plays soccer at a university, and she's been an athlete her entire life. And so I think about, as a parent, the extreme heat she sometimes plays in, and the weather qualities, and looking at also her gear. So I'm very conscious about all of the impact and to the planet that we can have, and just ultimately looking at how people, planet, and play is connected into absolutely everything we do. And it is something that's at the top of my mind, and probably even more so for my children. They are pushing it. So when you hear Dr. Ayana talk about the culture, it is very important that we, our kids, if the younger generation, they have, the culture is there. And they are definitely focusing in on people, planet, play. They're focusing in on it with their dollar as well, if you were to connect it to funds. So we have to be very conscious of how we are creating products in the future. And now we have always been focused in on how we're creating our products. As you highlighted, Frederica started in the product part of our company, which was great because I got to see the great work we've done through a great example, Space Hippie, and Dr. Ayana had a great conversation about our Space Hippie and how they're so cool. And they are by far our lowest carbon footprint shoe, which we make by basically transforming our own scrap into heat. And that means high heat that's on, your feet. You're a sneakerhead, you know where high heat is. And so it's just amazing to see like how my professional and my personal life has intersected in this space. And I think that as a company, we continue to push that, the intersection of this work, people, planet, play, and just the overall work through some of our work externally with organizations like Solstice, where we're empowering low income and Black, Indigenous people of color communities towards a just and inclusive clean energy transition, where we really believe there is a true intersection on this body of work. So we look to continue to push this work forward professionally and personally, and definitely with my passion, it's progression over perfection every day.
Well, thank you. We have not much time left, although we will continue this conversation for hours. Very interesting and very inspiring. Thank you very much, both of you, for your work. Dr. Ayana, like Nike, you are driving culture and conversation around the intersection of climate and justice throughout your spoken and written work. One of the things that you talk about is the debate between individual action versus systemic change, which I like. Can you tell us a little more about this?
Sure. First, I guess I should say it's kind of funny to hear you say, like Nike, you're driving culture and conversation, because it's like such a different scale, right? Which is why I've been excited to collaborate with Nike on, for example, the Talking Trash series, in conversation with some of their, collaborators like Billie Eilish and snowboard champion Chloe Kim, to talk about these issues, and have Nike, which actually is changing culture on a global scale, use their platform to talk about these things. So I think that is really powerful. To the extent that I can contribute to that, it's a really exciting opportunity for me, specifically because we can help people connect the dots between what they do as individuals and how they can participate in systems level change, right? How we can stop obsessing only about what we do within our own lives and in our own homes. And of course, being low waste and low carbon is super important, but thinking about how we can start to shift our communities, our cities, our towns, our states, our countries, our industries, our sectors, and what specifically we can each contribute to these changes that need to be made, whether it's advocating for more and better bike lanes, which like Europe is way ahead of the US on, right? Like we have a lot to learn from what you all are doing on that. And, what are we doing about composting? And like, how are we transforming our electricity grid? And so to the extent that we can help provide people with ways to participate in these systems level changes as individuals, I think that that is the sweet spot.
Well, I like to repeat that, like Nike, you're driving culture. You say it on your book, right? You gave voices to others. So we thank you also for your voice.
Thank you.
Of course. Let's talk a bit about the necessity of diversity for devising sustainability and solutions. Of course, we are aware that this is a journey Nike is currently on, and therefore may be difficult to have all the answer and to be 100% perfect. We've been hearing also a philosophy that I share, that it's progress over perfection. So maybe that kind of approach can be applied here. As we're coming towards the end of the conversation, I would like to ask both of you the same question. It seems like building a truly diverse workforce, diverse in gender, race, and ability, naturally breeds innovation and the kind of innovative thinking that can dream up the next spaceship issue or way to lower our supply chain's carbon footprint or a community-based sustainability program. How do you see the connection between furthering diversity and inclusion and create sustainable solutions?
Felicia? Yeah, absolutely. I can take that one. And, I'll be quick with it. I think is what you're seeing right now. It's in action. And continuously having these discussions and showing the intersection is key. And, I think just having partnerships with like Dr. Ayana and Nike has been amazing. And we just should continue these conversations. Dr. Ayana, I'd love to get you in on this one.
Sure. I mean, I think it's so important for people to understand that this is not a nice to have when we talk about diversity and sustainability. These are intertwined, and quantitatively, we know that in the US, for example, if we have, It's about 49% of white Americans who are concerned about climate compared to 57% of Black Americans and 70% of Latinx Americans. So people of color are actually more concerned. And it's the same with women. When we have more women with seats in parliament, we actually get better environmental laws. We get stronger climate policy. So quantitatively, we know that diversity matters because women, people of color, people from different backgrounds are seeing the problems differently and seeing solutions differently. And so that diversity is critical to coming up with ways to elegantly transform society from one based on fossil fuels to something that is more regenerative.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Ayana and Felicia, for being with us at CFS Plus. It's time to wrap up, but tackling this complex, demanding issues of improving diversity, equality, and sustainability seems really like a massive task. So thank you again. I'm sure that the audience enjoy your perspective, and we hope that there will be more examples of intersectionality between sustainability and justice. So thank you, and back to you, Emilia.